into that community and use the basis that they've got with the community to do other things. In other words, become more like social enterprises. And from where I sit, I think some housing associations do that and others don't. They stick to being simply a landlord. And I think that's not exploiting the potential they have to provide a much wider economic and social regeneration in some of the communities that housing associations are based in and have been based in for a number of years.
Owen Cook from Space Unlimited. A little while ago I was reading a piece in a paper and it was about FTSE 100 companies and their recruitment kind of process and what they go through, and the number one response to one of their questions of where do you see yourselves in 5 years' time to young graduates and undergraduates was working for myself or another social business doing something worthwhile. And I suppose with me that kind of brings to mind the idea that we're talking about the future of the economy here. The future of the economy for me is all about young people and what they become and what they do, not just about what we do and what we talk about. And I suppose the question really is, do you see any way to encourage new businesses or to adapt old businesses to have more of a social impact as part of their work?
I'm back on my town centres again.
You want to go to the suburbs every now and again?
I like my town centres, Allan. We did some work with ridings recently on businesses in town centres and vacancies, and we're going to circulate around. And we came to the conclusion, actually, that it was easier to keep the businesses that you've got than try and go and look for new ones. And one of the problems we actually have is losing the SMEs and the independents off the high streets and local high streets. They're either closing down economic circumstances or just purely that the owner wants to retire. And often we lose that business entirely, the younger generation don't want to take it on, and we lose obviously the local employment. There's been a lot of work done on independent business succession planning. And somehow we need to bring that back onto the table properly with all the various parties. And somehow we need to have the entrepreneurial spirit apprenticeship, if you like, lined up alongside a business that is operating and get that business to continue operating into the future. Because there's those SMEs on the high street and local high streets that provide the diversity on our high streets right the way across Scotland. And we need to get that match somehow and keep those businesses working.
Thanks, Steve. Yep. All right, guys. Julian?
I wouldn't like to twist the question too much, but I think there's a lot of worthwhile work already being done in Scotland. The work of the health sector and life sciences, for example. Seriously deep, intractable health-based problems are being addressed by really smart Scottish companies. The whole low-carbon agenda, some real worthwhile work being done there already. Even things like, experiential tourism. It's tourism where you get out and you do stuff rather than lying on a beach. Food and drink, health-enhancing food, a long way beyond the short-term worthwhile work of whisky. So I think the current makeup of the Scottish economy, there's many examples of really exciting, interesting, and worthwhile work that is proving attractive to bring Scots back to Scotland. So I think my glass would be half full on your observation.
The Wise Group has worked with Space Unlimited on a couple of projects over the past couple of years, and I think one of the things that Space Unlimited help you do is get a young person's perspective on genuine business issues and questions you've got. And often the responses that come out can be surprising. We had a group of people, Owen worked with this group about 2 months ago, and as part of the review of vocational training in Scotland, where we had about 15 young people that were all on different Wise Group programmes. So it was the kind of young person that left school early. Most of them hadn't worked, or they had some issues about whatever they might have got into, like an apprenticeship that didn't work or whatever. And the conclusions, apart from their incredible frustration about being let down by society, not because they weren't getting a job, but because people just didn't appear to be interested in them, didn't talk to them, and left them in limbo for a couple of years when they left school. But the main message they gave us was that they wanted to set up a young person's mentoring service. In other words, they wanted to help each other and people coming behind them. So they didn't fall into traps that they'd fell into. And I thought that was a really, really interesting perspective that young people were giving us. And they then tried to set up a social enterprise about young persons mentoring, but the strange side effect of putting them through this 3 days of facilitated work was most of them good jobs, so they didn't manage to do that. But the change in those young people over 3 days was also incredible. And I think maybe one of the other responses to Liz's question at the back about where social enterprise could make more of an impact is to work with the companies that Owen was talking about and Julian was talking about in Scotland. Because I think there is a huge untapped willingness by people in Scotland to do more for young people, whatever that might be. But somehow or other we haven't managed to get that momentum moving so that we can challenge the young people and businesses in Scotland to work more together outside of the mainstream apprenticeships and other things that are going on. I know they're there, and I know that for young people to get into them, it's often very successful. But most of the young people we were working with are the ones that are not at that level. So it's like pre-apprenticeships and at a stage below that.
Yeah, I was just going to say something sort of mildly provocative, I suppose, and quote Milton Friedman, the economist, who, I'm not quoting him, but I paraphrase. I mean, he said the greatest social contribution a company can make is to be a successful company. And I think I, to a large extent, agree with that. I think that what companies do to develop a sense of social purpose and make a social contribution, and many companies do, and many of our member firms, Martin Carr, RBS, do a lot, I would say that it's for companies as private entities to determine for themselves what works for them and what contribution they can make. I don't think this is something that can be driven by government policy or by public policy. I think it's very much a choice for individual companies. And the key focus for them, I think, has to be on running their successful business.
If you're talking about companies, I think RBS is the poster child for this. I think what the last 3 years have taught us is the absolute duty of a company is to make a profit and to make a decent return on the capital that people give it. And if you do that, then people get their pensions paid and all of the rest of that, because that's the only reason companies exist. Other stuff's interesting, and to the extent that it helps that mission, then do it. If it doesn't, don't.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of a diplomatic phrase or two here, Yeah, well, these companies were massively profitable through the greater part of the last decade, and what was the social contribution they made at the end of the day? It was collapsing the economy, and now, the people we represent are paying for that day in, day out. So, yeah, to an extent, I do agree. I think there's limits to how far government can intervene here, but, I think we have to remind ourselves that, we heard a lot in the first session about, business burdens and barriers to growth, etc. We live in the second most deregulated product market in the world, in the developed world, fact. We live in the third most deregulated labour market in the world, fact. So the fact, that we live in a very, very favourable environment for business to do what it does and to generate profits. I think that pendulum has swung far too far in one particular direction. I think it has to be rebalanced. And as I said earlier on, it's not just a matter of fairness and democracy, it's about a stable economy. At the end of the day, businesses having more of a genuine social purpose helps that business longer term, and it helps improve the stability of the economy. It makes us more immune to the type of systemic crisis. So it's just that. But in terms of practical things that can be done at a public policy level, we've heard a lot again today about procurement. We've now got a commitment for the government to introduce a sustainable procurement bill during this Parliament. What we have to see now is the Scottish Government making the most of the additional scope that was included in the 2006 European Public Procurement Directive to introduce social, environment and employment concerns when they're public contracting. We also need desperately Scotland's employer representative organisation to understand that these imperatives in the long run will be good for their members, and if they pursue an agenda as they did in 2006 that's about minimising business burdens, then that will only benefit the large global players, and it's not going to mean more contracts residing locally. So they have to open up to a far more holistic approach in this as well. But I think if we get that right, if we, it's not about opening up procurement to small companies, it's about a different type of procurement. It's about making the long-term sustainable growth of the Scottish economy the number one imperative that will drive that process. And I can certainly think that will help drive the type of business growth I think you're talking about.